Recovering Your Voice. My name's Bonnie.
And I'm Kathy.
And I'm Colette. I am privileged to introduce our guest, Kurtis, today. It was a recommendation from a previous guest, and she had explained how she heard a story of his near-death experiences. And I was fascinated because I know my mother had a near-death experience. However, after reading his bio, I was excited to meet a man of such character. He's been married 51 years. He also is raising his two granddaughters, and was a police officer. And what he's about to share with us will give us an insight of everything a police officer may be facing in a day. Can we just stand up and say thank you for doing what you do and keeping us safe? Oh my gosh, Kurtis, your life is amazing. Everything you're doing in your life is amazing. So you just share what you feel you need to share.
Throughout my walk as a Christian, I listed some of the things. Twice I've been attacked by bears and saved. 3 times by medical problems, one of which we're going to talk about. 4 times by auto. 2 of them were cruiser accidents, totaled cruisers, because I was an officer. 4 times almost drowning. 2 times by fire.
Oh my gosh.
3 times attacked by knives. 2 times by guns. 2 times almost killed in boats. 2 times almost killed in skidoos. 2 times by freezing. I fell off a mountain. I was hit by a tree once. I blew myself up as a kid once. As a kid, I was hit by a car. And I was lost once in a snowstorm for 2 days. First of all, that list of things that I told you throughout my walk, I truly believe that the Lord has put me in some situations, the valleys of death, so to speak, and yet he was always there. Some of them, or most of them, I never got hurt. Sometimes others did, but I didn't. And I can only attribute that to being protected. I pray protection around my home here with the girls and myself. And I do believe that that's a powerful thing to do. I have grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I have 21 of them. And some of them I like. My greatest fear is that they show up here someday all at the same time with their families. That is a scary thing for me. But sometimes they just show up 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 of them at once. And so, like I said, with the 2 girls I'm raising, they're keeping me alive. I came from an atheist family. I mean, very atheist, that didn't want to hear about God at all. At 9 years old, they sent me to the YMCA summer camp. That was good. But the next year, that camp was full. So my mom was struggling on where to send me. So she looked around and there was openings at a place called Dorian Bible Camp. And she sent me there. Well, she never realized this 10-year-old would end up accepting Christ and be moved so deeply by the things I was taught during that camp. I spent the next 3 years going to that camp. But in saying that, it's the only teaching I got. I left as a 12-year-old Christian, not having a church, not having a church family, not having a church home, not getting teaching. And I jumped around between everything from Seventh-day Adventist to Pentecost to Baptist to, I found over that time that one thing I did learn is that everybody had a truth and everybody embraced a lie. Until we see the Lord, we see through a glass darkly. Each church had some truth that I embraced, but they didn't have an impact on getting me to grow strong. And I lived most of my life just doing whatever the world did. And now that I'm in my 70s, I think back with great regret that I had done some of the stuff I had done, lived for the parties and lived for the group and drank and did everything I shouldn't have done. And yet I was a Christian. Back then, one of my friends that he was with me when we were attacked by the bear, later he became a minister. When I was in police college, the guy that I had led to the Lord, an officer in the York region, he became a minister now. A kid that we had brought to Winnipeg from up north, he's a minister in Winnipeg now. As a police officer, I've seen a lot of stuff. 5 of the guys I worked with have been shot. 3 of them when I was there. And one when he just left us, and I talked to him the other week, but he went blind after he got shot. And one up north that he lost his leg. But the 3 that got shot the day I was there, the guy I was working with, my sergeant, he died. And my other partner ended up in the hospital. And I was there the next day when the 3rd one got shot. All the same guy was shooting them. My greatest regret on all that was that, again, the Lord protected me, but the fellow that did the shooting, he was going to kill his dad weeks before, and I had seized the gun and his weapons, and I had them in the lockup in the OPP station. Well, I come back from being in Winnipeg, and I found that my sergeant had given him back the gun. And when I questioned why, I said I was sending that out to be destroyed. And he said, you can't take a person in the North's gun when they're a hunter now. I said, he's not a hunter. And I thought this out, and he just wants to shoot somebody. And he says, well, I'm the sergeant. I can do whatever I want. And you don't question me like that. So anyway, that's the gun that shot the sergeant. But I worked with him all that morning on a homicide, and I was on my way to Winnipeg when I heard that he got shot. I believe, but I can't prove it, that the fellow who did the shooting thought it was me. And so that's who I had got in his way from him killing his dad, and he had it out for me. The reason I know that is just about 5 years ago from Stony Mountain Penitentiary, a letter came from inmates that were still saying that they were going to get me. And this is like 40 years later. And they still hold grudges about who I was. So anyway, I was a 10-year-old when I accepted Christ, and I guess this is where we start to get into some of my story. Before the near-death one, there was something else that happened. I had a '68 Mustang, and I was driving in Thunder Bay, and going down the side of a bus 2 lanes over, and a great big truck pulled out in front of me, and I put the Mustang right under it, took his front wheel off, and I could look up the broken window and see his engine running. Anyway, I was not even hurt. I didn't have the 68 Mustang no more, but that it started to show that I was being protected. The bear incident, I might as well inject that because it happened around the same time period. My friend and I and his dog were hiking, and there was two cubs, and his dog was named Pickles. You don't have to edit that out. Pickles is dead now. Pickles was a cowardly dog, but when he seen two little cubs, he suddenly got brave. Well, he run after these cubs, and there was a bush just ahead of us, and we were yelling at him to stop. But he chased these cubs right up to the bush, and when he got to the bush, the top of the bush opened up, and the description I can give is that bear stood straight up, looked down at Pickles, come down on him, and then dug the dirt. And Pickles yelped and jumped out of the way, and the bear threw the dirt over both of its shoulders, a great two big paws of dirt. And then it looked up at us, and it charged. Pickles shot right by us, being the cowardly dog she is. And that bear, we couldn't even turn to run because that bear covered 40 or 50 feet in seconds and was just about to grab either one of us. Then all of a sudden, from between us came Pickles, super dog, super brave, bit at the bear and started fighting with the bear, jumping from side to side while the bear tried to kill the dog, giving us time to get away. That was the protection. Pickles finally showed up after fighting with the bear with no injuries or anything, real happy and looking at us. But the cowardly dog was a hero, but I contributed to the Lord. You know, we were under his wing and his protection. So we get to where I had to go and get anesthetic for work on my teeth. Everything was fine. I had gone through the pre-checkup and everything was fine, and they put me on an anesthetic. They did their adjustments to it, and then they left the room, and I realized at some point that something was wrong, because suddenly I was over my body and I was looking down. It's as if the room had no roof, no ceiling. That I must have been 20 feet above it, looking down at the whole picture of the room with me on the table, or on the chair. I looked down, and I was watching, and as I watched, the nurse and doctor came in, and the doctor started yelling that the settings were wrong or something. I don't know enough about what was wrong because I never did ask him that, but I had left my body, and so I was over them and watching them work on me. This went on for a little while, and then all of a sudden I left, and there was a tunnel that I've tried to draw, tried to find something that looked like it. I've tried to describe it. The most I can say is that it looked like a tunnel that was as big as a city, and I was small going into it, and it looked like the interior of twined rope, where you get the little hairs out of the strings, and these little hairs all glowed. The whole tunnel glowed with an internal light, and each of the little fibers coming out of the windings also glowed. And I continued through this tunnel and ended up in a place. Now, there was a person who always stood on my left, and he was showing me things. Now, most of it, when I came back, was taken away from me. I went through a lot of something, teachings or whatever, but it was taken away from me. And one of the things I do remember, though, was I was standing, and in the distance I could see the throne, and there was an arc of people all the way from the throne all the way around over a distance and up to me. And my person, who is our angel or Jesus, was on my left. And I was watching them fall to their knees, but only one at a time, one at a time, one at a time. And this went on a long time. And I turned, I didn't look again, but I said, what's happening to them? Why are, and he says, well, you watch and we'll get, it'll come to you. And I watched, long time. And finally, the one next to me fell down to his knees. And then it hit me. And what it was that made me fall to my knees was I was inundated with truths about me, truths about everything. And I fell to my knees. And then I was shown other things. One thing you have to realize when you're there, there's no time and space. I was there a long time, and yet they were working on my body back here. So it seems that I was shown all kinds of things, but one thing that I do remember was I was shown the future of my wife and my son. I only had one son then, and it wasn't good. Without me, there was bad things that were going on with her surviving with a boy and no husband. Anyway, I was given the choice to come back, and I didn't want to go back, but I seen this future, and it was a possible future if I stayed. This is the future for her. Anyway, I decided to come back. Anyway, it was almost instant that I came back, and it probably only minutes for the doctor and the nurse. But I came back and I went into my body and I started to cry because it was devastating being back in the body. From where I was to where now I was in a body, I did not like being back in the body. So anyway, that day ended and I didn't ask the doctor anything, but I had to go back a couple of weeks later. And I said, when I went into the office, I said, doctor, last time I was here, did something happen to me? And his face went white and he said, what do you mean? And I said, nothing. You just confirmed it, because it scared him, that he had never reported it or said anything to me, but I could see by his face and his reaction that he could not figure out how I knew what I knew. Many years later, I was in a trade show up in Red Lake, and we had a table set up, and the lady with me was a Christian also. And during the time when we were meeting all these people, one lady came up with her husband, and she looked at me and she said, "You've been there." And I said, "Where?" She said, "In heaven." And she said, the husband said, "Oh, don't mind her. She does this every now and then. She can see who has died and come back." And I said, "How do you know that?" And she says, "I can see it in your face." I don't know how, but it's not a gift I ever had.
When you said that there was no time, that you saw no time in heaven, my mother had that happen to her too. And when she came back for a week after, time didn't exist for her, in the sense that she didn't look at her watch. She knew when she had to get up and go to work. She just instinctively knew the time after her encounter. So that so lines up in my heart.
Was she depressed on being back in the body?
Oh, she struggled, but
Yeah,
there was a glow about her.
yeah. It's hard to come back. I've had I've had four major auto things. One was, I told you, was the Mustang. Uh, Two of them were cruisers. One of the cruisers, I was alone and heading for town from a community north of us, and what I had in my possession was a report from the sergeant saying how bad the road conditions were, and that we would close that road if the ministry didn't get up and fix it. Anyway, I come around a corner and I hit a rock that was too close to the road, I guess. And I was in a big Bronco, one of the big Broncos, Ford Broncos. And when I hit that rock, I flipped into the air and come down on the roof. Now, when I came down on the roof, everything went into slow motion. I could see the roof crumpling toward me. In fact, it crumpled almost to my shoulders, pushing my head down. And it was fascinating because the windows imploded and I seen little cubes of glass from the windshield, and they were fascinating. The time slowed right down, and I was watching them spin like little planets heading toward me. And then when they reached toward my face, I closed my eyes and I could feel them all hit. And my wife was about 20 miles away working in an office, and she turned to her coworker and she said, "Something just happened to Kurtis." She knew it. Anyway, the engine was going high speed and I could smell gas because I'm on my roof now. So I managed to turn it off and I got out, and not a scratch. Other than feeling glass hit me, and there wasn't anything wrong with me. I got to Kenora and gave my report, and I got called into the superintendent's office, and he was at the window looking out, and he just reached back and he went, "Come here." And I walked up and I stood beside him, and the flatbed was coming into the back of the detachment with my crushed vehicle. And he says, "Were you hurt?" And I said, "No." And he said, "I understand you brought the report on the road." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, you didn't have to prove it." Anyway, he says, "I'm glad you weren't hurt. Get out of here." So that was the only thing he said. He was just glad I wasn't hurt. So that was one of the accidents. Another one where we come around a corner. This is the sergeant that ended up shot in the face and it went blind. But we come around a corner, and on our side of the road was three Americans that had been up fishing in Canada with the American vehicle, with a full boat on the back on a trailer, and they're on our side of the road. We had a big Suburban, and we hit head on. And my sergeant ended up with nerve damage because we hit so hard that he, holding the steering wheel, he bent the steering wheel down from the impact. He actually bent a steering wheel, and he ended up with nerve damage in both wrists. Again, nothing wrong with me. I had a little bit of scratch on the head. I run to check the guys in the other vehicle. They were all okay. They had the bigger vehicle. Our Suburban Cruiser looked like a banana now. It just bent it completely. And so that was then another accident. Now we get to the accident, or the missing. It could have been the worst. We were in British Columbia, and I had a guy, I won't mention his name, I don't know where he is now, but if you ever seen this video, he'd probably freak because we were driving and I had Pontiac Parisienne, and my brother, who was a mechanic, had rebuilt the engine, and this little V8 just screamed. And so I wanted to show this guy I was with how fast it could go. We were on a highway, and I looked all the way down, and there was no traffic that morning. So I opened her right up, right to the top end, as fast as she would go, just to show him how fast it would go. Just when I got to the top end of the speed, out of nowhere come this flatbed truck. And he seen me heading toward him at such a high speed, and he locked his brakes up, but he jumped across the road, and his flatbed blocked everything. So I locked up the brakes, and you could just hear my brakes screaming. The guy that I was with, he didn't have a seatbelt on, so he hit the dash because I locked up the brakes and fell down to the floor. And he was actually lower. Me, I had my seatbelt on and I was behind the steering wheel, and I was approaching this vehicle on a full skid, and I couldn't avoid it. I seen that the height of the flatbed was such that it would cut the top off the car and cut me in half. So I closed my eyes because I didn't want to see one half of me down and one half of me flying. So I closed my eyes. Everything went silent. And it was so silent that I opened my eyes. There was no flatbed there. And then I looked in the rear view mirror, and the flatbed was behind us. And the brakes weren't even screaming, but I released it. And the fellow got up from the floor. He says, "What just happened?" I said, "Yeah, well, you just seen a miracle, or I wish you had seen the miracle, but there was a miracle." He says, "Where's the truck?" I said, "Behind us." "How we'd get past it?" I said, "I have no idea. Either angels lifted the truck and we went under it, or lifted us over it." In hindsight, I wish I had talked to the driver of the truck. Probably changed his life, whatever he's seen, but I never talked to him. And I've lost track of the fellow that was with me over the years. So that's the truck. Those are all my auto accidents.
Keep going. Just keep sharing. This is amazing.
I'll go to skidoos. We had our own skidoos, but we never really got into accidents with it. But I was on Lake of the Woods, and sometimes I had to go across to the American side, where I kept my cruiser. I actually would drive from Ontario to Manitoba and then to Northwest Angle, Minnesota, and leave my cruiser at the sheriff's place. Anyway, just a side rabbit trail. One time I arrested a guy way up in the bush that was on warrants for a long time, and I found him in a logging operation. I brought him down to where my detachment was, and then I went across to the Minnesota side, and we got in the cruiser. Then we went to Manitoba, and then I went around back into Ontario and brought him to the court in Kenora, or the jail in Kenora. And when we got to court, the judge said, "Where did you find him?" And I said, "On Lake of the Woods." He said, "How did you get him in to us?" And I told him. He said, "So you're saying you arrested him in Canada, brought him to the States, went to another province, and back to Ontario, and you had custody of him?" And I said, "Yeah, you got to do what you got to do." And then his lawyer started to say something. The judge said, "Quiet, I'll accept that." Because technically I didn't have that authority in the States or Manitoba. But the judge just said, no, I accept that. This guy was wanted on warrants for a long time and he brought him in. So that could have been a problem. But I was going across one day and it was quite a big police skidoo, very fast. And I was heading for the American side and I hit an ice ridge. And that skidoo just exploded because it bent the skis up, tore the top off. I flipped and I come down on my back and hit so hard with my helmet that it did cut my neck a bit with the strap. Anyway, I remember getting up and I was walking on the ice, and then I realized I'm walking toward the American side. And then I turned around and quite a ways back, I could see this bits of skidoo all over the ice, and it was on its side and the engine was still running and with the light on. And I could see other skidoos coming from the American side and the Canadian side because they had seen the accident. I don't remember who gave me a ride back or how we got the skidoo to Kenora, but it, I was almost killed with that one. But again, the Lord protected me, and I didn't have to go to the hospital or anything. The other skidoo accident, or it wasn't even an accident, but it had the potential to be. It was springtime, and I decided to do one more patrol down an area that between two lakes that we had done many times over the winter. But I didn't have a partner to go with, so I went alone. I said, "This is what I'm going to do. Take one more look at the trails. They're starting. It's springtime. They're starting to go." On the way, and it's a lake called Keys Lake I was going to. On the way to Keys Lake was a small lake, and it has a little waterfall. And as I crossed the lake on the Skidoo Trail, I looked toward the waterfall, and it was just beautiful in the spring sun. The water was running, and it was about several hundred feet between me and the waterfall, and the water was running, and I crossed the ice and I went up this small mountainside and continued until I got to Keys Lake, and I explored there and make sure that everything was fine. Nobody was stuck there, or ice fishing shacks or vehicles stuck. I come back, but it was a full moon when I was coming back. And I come over that small mountain and down onto the lake. This is the last leg of the journey before I go into the bush and come out at the detachment. And because it's a full moon, I glanced over as I was going across the ice. I glanced over to see the waterfall in the moonlight. And the fear hit me so bad. I squeezed the handlebars just as hard as I could, because what I seen was during the day, the waterfall had melted all the ice right up to where I was. There was no ice on both sides of me, just the ice I was on, the little ribbon of a trail floating. And this is quite a long little lake. And the fear was unbelievable, but I just concentrated on staying on the ribbon of ice, but I didn't know if it reached the other shore. So I kept on going wide open, and I crossed, and it went right to the other shore, and I climbed up. Later in the years, I did a sermon at Union Gospel Mission and to the street people there. And I had told that story, and a lot of them were from the north, and they really related to my story. Some of them had seen stuff like that, the floating trail. Anyway, that's again, the Lord is good. I didn't have to drown. I don't know how they would have found me, because with all my equipment and guns and everything else, I would have been on the bottom of the lake like some dead pirate, just sitting on the skidoo still.
Sometimes these things happen in our life and we don't really even pause to think about them or give God recognition. But how do you handle going from all of these situations each time? Is there a tendency to almost be expecting it each time? How do you deal with that?
I don't know. My mom said when I was small, or not real small, but she said she used to worry about me because um, all the kids would be playing and I'd play by myself. I was always self-reliant. I I think it was because there wasn't really good things at home. I never knew my father, and then I had a stepfather later on. But she said she worried about me, that I was always a loner. I dealt with things on my own. When I worked at Union Gospel Mission, the chaplain there, we used to have meetings together, and he'd do a little bit of counseling with me, and he says one of the things he noticed with me was, he said, and this I'll try to get how he said it. He said, if a bomb blew up here in Union Gospel Mission, you're the type of person who would not even recognize the bomb, but know what to do for everybody around you. And I said, yeah, that's true. And that was his take on, after counseling me and working with me, that of my character. So over the years, I've saved a couple of dozen people and only lost two. One of them, well, both of them, I think, were beyond when I got there. But two people I couldn't resuscitate, and a lot of them I did. So, or brought them to the hospital and saved their lives. And that's including two car accidents. One of them, the guy hit a plow and it tore the top of the car off. Then he hit a pole and went up the pole. Well, the car was running at high speed on an angle up this pole, and I got out, and I had the kids and my wife with me, and I got out and I started climbing this car to the guy that was trapped in the driver's seat, and I noticed a piece of metal through the back of his neck, and his holding his neck over the steering wheel, and he wasn't breathing. So I grabbed this metal and I pulled it out of his neck, cut my own hand, I think. And as soon as his head went back, he started to breathe. And I looked over my shoulder, and because the car was going high speed smoking, my wife had drove half a block away to get the kids away from what I was doing. And while I was there, they pulled the car down and they started using the jaws of life to open up the car. And all of a sudden, this guy comes from my yard. And I said, I was talking to him, and I found out he was the passenger. When the plow took the whole roof off, he was thrown from the car over the fence into this yard, and he just woke up over there and come to the scene of the accident. So then anyway, they were busy working, and I got back in with the kids and my wife and left. Never did find out. They never asked my name or anything. So that was in Winnipeg. And another one in Winnipeg, I worked some security work at the Royal Canadian Mint. That's armed security for the federal government. And I was on my way home after a shift, and I seen these lights where there shouldn't be lights, way off the bypass highway. So I worked my way around, and it was 40 below. And here a guy had left the highway, hit a concrete post of some sort. I don't know why it was there. And the car was up on top of the post, and it had stopped other than the lights on. And he'd been there for a long time. So when I climbed up, I noticed he was freezing to death. That was what was happening to him. So I took my parka off and I wrapped them up, phoned it in, and while waiting for emergency vehicles, I started freezing. So again, after they took control of it, I left. They never found out who I was or anything, which is okay. The Lord led these people to me. It's not for me to be in the local paper, you know.
Curtis, did you always have an inkling, like you went obviously into police work? Was this desire from a young age? Did you always know, oh, I want to be a police officer and help people?
I did, and one of my biggest regrets is when I got out of it. But um, I I had a neighbor across the street. He was a sergeant in the Thunder Bay Police Force, and I was only a little boy. And when he'd come home for lunch, I'd run across the street, and he'd let me sit in the cruiser and listen to the police calls, and that went on for a couple of years. So yeah, I knew it, and so I fulfilled that part of what I wanted to do. I'm still in the police association, and we have meetings, and I meet all the guys I trained with and everything. A lot of them are dying off now, and I'm in the Christian Police Association, Canadian Christian Police Association. So I still have ties to all these guys. It's a team. It's unbelievable, uh, the team feeling of being in a vet with the police.
Curtis, you've gone from police work and probably other things in between, but now you have this important job of looking after two little girls.
Mm-hmm.
What's that been like?
It's hard more on my wife than me, I guess, because I'm like a robot. I just go about everything and just do whatever. It's harder on her. She feels that we should be traveling and everything at this time of our life, but they're really good girls.
Love your character. That's what drew me into this interview deeper. Okay. Well done, good and faithful servant.
This rock is what is representing me. And at 10 years old, that's what I became. I'm still a rock, but inside, I like that rock.
You might like that rock, but God loves that rock, Curtis. Yeah. He loves that rock.
My first husband was a police officer, so I know from a wife's point of view how hard that is, living the life of the wife of a officer. So how did your family deal with all of those things that have happened to you?
Well, I think it was harder on the kids moving and stuff. So it's one of my regrets that we moved too much. And one time we went up north, and I was up there for 18 months at Bearskin Lake, fly in only. And I think that was hard on them. A couple of times we were apart, and because of instances, one was they were a threat to the family. They were going to kill the family. And so they moved to town, and I stayed there. It was hard. One time I had gone to Winnipeg, and we were at a friend's place, and we were in one guest room. And back where I worked, I used to leave guns hanging on the wall for quick response called out at night. But up the street in Winnipeg, the police there got in a gunfight with a bikers clubhouse, and they were shooting out the window at the police. And I woke up hearing the firing of these pistols, and I knew what they were. And my wife said that I jumped up out of bed, and I was going along the wall at my friend's place saying, "Where are my guns?" And she says, "We're not at home. We're in Winnipeg." I go, "Oh." but I was feeling along the walls in the dark looking for my guns so I could strap them on. But so little things like that. I think that I wasn't easy to live with. Like I said, I was never raised under good, solid Christian teaching, and so a lot of stuff I've just had to learn to temper myself and to adopt what I'm able to adopt, to walk the walk. Being a police officer, I did tap into the fact that my authority came in Romans 13, and that I carried not the sword in vain, and but to execute judgment on the ungodly. So I was asked by a partner once. He says, "I know you're a Christian. If somebody pulls a gun on me, can I count on you?" I said, "Somebody pulls a gun on you, in a heartbeat, he's going to be dead." And I said, "And I have the authority in the Bible to do that." And he said, "That's all I wanted to hear." He was worried because he might have met people that are pacifists and not being able to, would second guess themselves. There was this one gun call that we were on that kind of threw me a little bit. We come to a call, and on the road was a guy with a rifle, and he was aiming right at us. And I skidded to, or no, my partner skidded to a stop, and the guy with the gun ended up by his door. And while we were skidding, I had radioed to Kenora, and I said, "He's got a gun," and because there was another cruiser coming up behind us, and "He's got a gun," and that was the last transmission. So the whole district went on quiet down, listening for calls. My partner tried to open his door and hit the gun away with the door, and the door hit the end of its swing and then bounced back and hit him. In the meantime, I had gone out my door, and I had pulled my revolver, and I come over the hood, and I was going to squeeze off a shot because he was right there. And he glanced over at me, and he threw the gun to the ground because he could see that it would be all over shortly. So I came around, told him to get on the ground, and I came around, and my partner was starting to handcuff him, and I still had my gun out on him. When he was handcuffed, I relaxed, and this is what threw me. My handgun was in my hand, and when I relaxed, I seen the hammer go back down. A revolver has a 5.5 pound pull, and I was on the verge of any little jerk, and it would have fired because it was hovering. The hammer was hovering. I often thought, with witnesses around and that, what a story that would have been, that they had him handcuffed and then the other officer shot him in the head. But it's how quickly, or how it would be misinterpreted, what had happened. And it was only that I had locked in on pulling off a shot, and I had locked in, and it was still hovering. And I don't know why it didn't go off. Again, the Lord. It would have been real bad executing a person in handcuffs.
I love that story because, yeah, again, God had you. Like, God had you even in that, right? You're doing your job.
I was really struck with your experience in heaven, and you talked about one by one. I think you called it an arc of people falling to their knees, and the reason that you fell was from the weight of the truths that were spoken into you. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I don't remember what it was that came upon me, but I knew that it was uh, a sudden realization of all the truths regarding me, and all the misconceptions just fell away, and it was just pure truth that drove me to my knees. And I realized that every man I had seen, or every person I had seen on that whole arc, which was, I don't know, I must have seen 100 people go to their knees one at a time. I realized that each of them had seen what I had just seen. I wish that more of it was retained, but when I chose to come back, a lot of the stuff was not for me to come back with. And it was another thing, being back in the body, I grieved about, is not having all that information at my disposal, because seemed that I was there a long time. And I've told people that there's no time and space there. And my mom, I led to the Lord about a year and a half ago, and she died last year, or maybe 2 years ago. I led her to the Lord, and as she was dying, I was there, and I told her that when there's no time and space, and you're going to love what you're about to see, and this is just minutes before she passed, and I said, you're going to look back when you get there, and you're going to see me walking up, because there is no time and space. All of us would have been here longer, but from your perspective, we're all there. We're walking up, whether it was the rapture or the end of time or whatever, but you're going to see us all right behind you. So she's in an area where there's no time and space, and she's actually embracing me in my future. And that's the impression I got, no time and space. And it was hard to come back here in time, in a body that hurts and is fallible. And there was one gun call, they held off quite a number of officers for a while, and then I was off, and I got a call, and they said, you have to come down here, don't get in uniform, just take your gun and handcuffs and that, and come down, meet us at so and so place. And I met and realized it was a gun call, and they was holding them off. And I said, why am I here? And they said, well, he requested you. So anyway, I went in the door, again, not scared if he shot me dead. So I went in the door, and I took his gun, and I handcuffed him, and I said, just by the way, why did you ask for me? And he says, well, I know you'd only shoot me if you had to. Them, I'm not so sure about, because I've held them off for such a long time. So I come out, and they said, okay, thanks, Kurtis. We'll take it from here. I said, no, you're not. I'm the arresting officer. He requested me. I'm going with him, and I'm doing all the paperwork and the investigation. I'm right now I'm on duty, and I'm on duty until I do this right. And they didn't like that, but nothing they could say.
Kurtis, would it be fair to say that you weren't worried about death because you had the assurance that it would be God's will when the time happened?
Exactly. That's exactly what it was. It's like being thrown in the furnace, and if it's God's will, you'll burn up. If it's not God's will, you'll come out. And they came out and walked with Jesus while they were in there.
Kurtis, is there anything that we haven't allowed you or given you time to tell us and you still would like to share?
Just one little comical note. I said that when I was young, I blew myself up. Well, I got my mother's sealer that she does preserves in, and I sat there one morning, and I took boxes of matches, and I broke the heads off, and I filled half this sealer with match heads, and I would put the lid on, and I was on the front step. I took a magnifying glass, and I lit one of the matches. All I remember is a little bit of smoke. They said 2 blocks away they heard the explosion. Anyway, it blew me off the step, and I had glass in under my jaw and neck. But it blew me right off the step. There was nothing left of the sealer other than the glass in my neck. But they said they heard that explosion for 2 blocks. So I don't recommend it.
How old were you?
14 or so. I was already a Christian 4 years.
How old were you when you knew that it was God that saved you? You have no doubt that you should be dead. How old did that start at?
The bear was the first one.
Okay.
Because the cowardly dog became a superhero dog. And that bear was big. You know, I guess I was small. But she was angry when she can throw dirt over her shoulders. So I knew at that point. And I think my friend who became a minister, he knew.
So much in that, Kurtis, in your story, so much that you experienced. And thank you so much for sharing it with our viewers today. If you enjoyed hearing Kurtis's story and you have a story that you would like to share, you can contact us at recoveringyourvoice@gmail.com. But until next time, please keep sharing your story. Welcome to Recovering Your Voice. My name's Bonnie.
And I'm Kathy.
Okay, let's try that again, girl.
You're waiting for Carol Ann and she's
You're
not
waiting
here.
for Carol Ann. I'm gonna always have your girls back. I'll always be the end.
And Colette, do you want to do the ending?
No.
It's kind of like Carol Burnett when she used to say goodnight at the end of the show.
And then do the ear.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And people are used to seeing you, Bonnie.
Exactly, sweetie.
At the end.
It's true, honey. You open, you close it. I'm not trying to give you more work. For goodness sake, I do that every day. Just please be you, okay? Okay.
All
you
right.
didn't tell him the bibbity bobbity boop part.
I think he's got a nice, calm voice that we won't have to tell him that part.
Okay.
I'm the king of rabbit trails. Yeah.